Hey guys, Dennis here, Muddy Water Search and Recovery. You know
Chrissy.
Chrissy, you know Tamara. Most of you will remember Benny up in the top. And we are joined by an independent investigative journalist who has been working on Melissa Trumpy's case as well. So thank you guys for joining us here tonight.
Yep.
So
thank you for having us.
Those of you who watched part one saw that there is a lot going on out in that area with Melissa's case, with other cases, other situations going on. And Benny, obviously it all didn't fit into part one. So here we are, part two. Yeah, we'll go ahead and
I don't remember where exactly we left off at. Or if we need to pick up where we left off or just, get into talking about what's going on there. I like the fact that Todd's on here too, because I figure that he can give you another perspective, because it's always good to, I think you should, in a situation like this, it's good to get a lot of different perspectives on what's going on. And I'm hoping that if some more people from the community there join us, and even, if we continue doing these live feeds like this, hopefully quite a few people from Carroll County get involved. I think that would be good. Plus the other people in other parts of the country, like Dennis, I started talking to you about what your post about Aaron Shane Key, because that was so eerily similar to what we believe is going on, in Northern Illinois. And it, and I think, and we've talked about it, but it seems to be a bigger picture throughout the rest of the country too. There is some high level organized crime. I would say cartel. When we think of cartels, we're thinking it's, brown skinned people, because that's what the media tells us. It's people in Mexico and people in Colombia or whatnot. But I think a lot of what's going on with this police corruption and the drugs, the massive amount of drugs in this country, I don't think that we can just blame it on our neighbors. I think that it's also a homegrown problem. And the big part about it being a homegrown is it is not being addressed by our government. I believe our government is hiding from us, our own U.S. homegrown cartel activity. And I believe it involves a lot of high level people in law enforcement, in the judicial system, and in our federal government, and in our state governments. And in Illinois, I think Illinois just has a reputation for corruption, And I was talking to somebody the other day, and I'm like, well, what does corruption mean to you? Like, everybody says, well, Illinois is corrupt, and Carroll County is corrupt. And that's like, you ask people walking down the street in Carroll County about Carroll County, and they're just going to, that one of the first things many people will tell you is how corrupt it is. But what does that corruption mean to them? Does that just mean like getting stopped and getting a ticket by rude cops? Or is it, is it that cops abuse their authority? Are cops mistreating people physically, police brutality? But I think so many people know that there's police. I think that people at the same time, even the people that know it, are maybe naive to how high the level of corruption actually is. I believe that corruption is high level as it goes. And I think that all drug cartels seem to operate with, whether or not they're in the U.S. or Mexico, Colombia, wherever, Jamaica. I think that most of these cartels operate with government corruption, And when you really think about drugs, I mean, we're talking about substances that are worth more than gold, worth more, some of them, on par with precious stones or, other precious metals, even more valuable than gold. And I think that there's so much money in it that I think that our own government I really think that they're a big part of the problem. And I just think there is a huge, tremendous failure to address. We like to, we're waging a war on drugs here in America, but we blame the Mexicans, we blame the Colombians. The money's coming from the US, and I think in Illinois, it's long-term corruption. We're talking about the home of Al Capone, and I think he was so successful because of, it's central. It's a central location, and then you combine that with the Mississippi River and the shipping on the Mississippi, and all the different organized crime groups in Illinois. Crime groups, and the Mexican and Central and South American cartels, and I just think it's a recipe for disaster. And I think that if our country doesn't wake up, we're going to be living in a third world country. I think we're pretty close. The corruption is so bad that I believe, we're close. I just think that they do a better job of hiding it here in the US because they know if people here knew the truth, that we'd stand up and put a stop to it. And I don't know how that so much of this stuff can fly under the radar. Talking about Tennessee and Aaron Shane Key, it happened at a known drug house. The police seem to be protecting people. The state's attorney seems to be protecting people. Well, that's the very same stuff that's going on in Carroll County, Joe Davies County, northwestern Illinois. Honestly, it's probably going on in the entire state of Illinois. It is in a regional, the northwestern part of the state. But I believe it's a bigger problem than just that. And
Hey, Benny, I think you might need to clear anything else on your phone that might be running in the background, or go closer to your Wi-Fi because you're really starting to break up a lot.
Oh, okay. See, I might not even have my Wi-Fi turned on. I don't. That could be it. I'm just running off my phone's data right now. So let me see if that helps.
So since the last time we talked, has there been any updates? Has there been anything new that's come up? I mean, I know that with our group, we've had some discussions about things, but just curious. Go ahead.
Well, I can say, and I don't want to name anybody who told the specific person or the specific person because I think it's kind of hush hush. I am hearing some chatter that Derek Hammer might be charged for Melissa's death soon, but the investigation we know is flawed because they left out suspects, they left out witnesses, they left out crime scenes that we know of. And I feel like they know they have to do something about Derek because there's too much pressure, and whether or not it's a lot of it now is from Jackson's case, from a couple journalists like Todd and another pretty big journalist that's working on Melissa's case, and their pressure and countless FOIA requests that Todd and other journalists and other people even just we bump into random people online and they're like, oh, I FOIA requested this on Melissa's case, I FOIA requested that, and we didn't even know these people were doing that. And you know what, I applaud them for taking that initiative on their own to do that. And I think there's been an uptick in the public, the community interest and attention on Melissa's case. And like I said, I think a big portion of that probably came from Jackson Cradle's unfortunate his own case, and really grateful just to see some good movement on that, seeing some positive things going on with Jackson's case. I think that really it's let me see that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And even if these corrupt police officers are trying to cover up murders, they can be caught. And I believe that prosecution is coming very soon, like I said, at least in Jackson's case. And it's reassuring, that that's happening. And yeah, I don't know. If there's you guys have any questions or anything, whatever.
So let me come in here, I guess. I'll introduce myself. My name is Todd. So one of the big things on Melissa's FOIA the last FOIA I got was, and this is for all your audience members, if you guys learn how to do FOIAs, the number one thing you can always ask for is name and badge numbers of officers on scene. They're bound to give it to you. So we do know that there were 6 officers from Carroll County. I've not done any of these other surrounding counties. 6 officers from Carroll County were on scene. One of the officers, I'm gonna name him because it's on a FOIA. I mean, it is public information right now. Is last name Despain. Despain is actually through marriage. Aaron Caney, the state's attorney's brother-in-law. So, family ties, call it what you want, but I mean that's public knowledge. You can look up, marriage certificates and all this other stuff. And an officer on scene, I don't know how many other cases, but it's very, very interesting to have an officer on scene related to the actual state's attorney. And it could be just small town, everybody's related to everybody, but it's, I don't know. Looks bad in the eye of public opinion. Let's just put it to you that way.
Nepotism, is that what we're talking about, Todd? Is that what they call that, nepotism?
I think so, where you pat a family member's back and you get them a job, or, you say, hey, I don't know. Like we talked, I don't think anybody's been in prison or in jail for nepotism, but it does exist. So that's an update on Melissa's cases. There were 6 officers on scene. I'm working on some other stuff on it. Can't really discuss it right now. I'll discuss it when it becomes public. I did do some research. So this is how Ben was talking about how inefficient government is, like local government, federal government, state government. We're looking at doing a FOIA for the Mount Carroll Police, because the first officer on scene on Jackson's case was a Mount Carroll police officer. His name was Scott. Okay. So we were looking up how to do a FOIA on Mount Carroll's, who their FOIA officer was, because each small town has a specific FOIA officer, and you have to look it up online and get the name, and then send. I like to send them a test email that says, "Hey, are you the FOIA officer?" They usually reply back, "Yes, I am," and then I can rattle off my FOIA request. I don't want to rattle it off to the wrong person, because then it wastes everybody's time. So I do a test email. So I was looking up online last night, trying to find their FOIA officer. So hopping on Mount Carroll's website, and it said Scott Marth was the police chief, and everybody around says that it's not. And I'm like, okay, well, this is weird. So I went to another page that says all the department heads, and it has every single department head listed, like, highway department, animal department, wild animals, city streets. The only one blank is the police chief. So, and then you go try and find their city minutes online. There should be published on their website or online. There's no minutes that says that, hey, we've done a police chief. There's no newspaper that says, hey, we hired a police chief. So for me, I can't find a paper trail of who is even Mount Carroll's police chief right now, and that's how inefficient these small town governments are. Like, I made a post on Facebook today, like, hey, if ABC News or NBC News picks up Jackson's case, which I hope they do, because my goodness, it's got to be national news right now that a drunk officer killed an 18-year-old after parties and covered it up, went to the, like, ugh. And then his EMT girlfriend, but it needs to be national news. I've been pushing uh
It should be.
Chicago radios, St. Louis radios, another St. Louis radio. I actually was on live radio the other day and I wasn't supposed to be. So yeah, you just call some phone numbers on these radio stations and they're like, hey, you're on the air. And I'm like, but if they find out that a Mount Carroll officer was on scene, the body cam wasn't working, the cop cam wasn't working.
Yep, dash cam wasn't working either.
Yeah, you're supposed to talk to the police chief, and if your basic government can't even list the police chief, how are people supposed to have confidence that your police department is on the up and up?
So if I may break in here for a minute, I
Hey,
can clarify some of those. Hi, Benny, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. Fighting the fight, you know.
Yeah.
So Rick Cass is the chief of police for Mount Carroll right now. Scott Marth was the chief of police when Fred Cass stepped down, but something
his
happened
brother.
with Steve. Yep, something happened with Steve or Scott Marth, and they made him step down from chief. I don't know what it was, but I know he had to step down. They made him step down.
He is still listed. Scott Marth is still listed as the Mount Carroll police chief on their website. So officially on the government website, it is Scott.
Yeah, well, it's not. Rick Cass is the chief of police.
And Rick Cass, like you said, was the chief of police, and after his brother, Fred Cass, who also, Fred Cass is, Dennis, when I sent you the cold case file for Jeff Hammer, Fred Cass is, I mean, to me, you read that, it sounds very much like Fred Cass is the actual suspect, which I believe along with Derek. I don't believe Fred Cass killed Jeff Hammer, but I believe that Fred Cass covered up Jeff Hammer's murder for Denise Hammer and Derek Hammer. And so Fred Cass used to be the Mount Carroll chief of police. He left and went to maybe Stockton or Elizabeth. Now he's the chief of police in Elizabeth. But then they put Scott Marth in there. Then they pull Scott Marth out, like Renee is saying. And now Fred Cass's brother, Rick Cass, talk about nepotism again, is the chief of police in Mount Carroll. And honestly, I believe that they're responsible for a lot of the corruption in the area between the both of them. And that's my opinion. I will say I believe it's more than potentially. My personal opinion, a lot of the corruption in the area comes from Fred and Rick Cass.
I honestly think it comes from a lot more than just them.
Oh, it is. It is a lot more than, yeah.
All the way up to the judges. I mean, Judge Brinkmeyer is definitely not a good candidate for a judge. I mean, he was a prosecuting attorney for 26 years, and then they threw him into being a civil judge. And I mean, he tried like 2 of our cases, and it took him a year and a half to evict the people that we had in our house. Meanwhile, they were destroying our house from the inside out. And to me, that's criminal. I mean, there should be a fine line between what's civil and what's criminal. And he absolutely, I don't think he knows. I believe that Brinkmeyer is definitely on a paid program.
Absolutely. Yeah, you don't have to look very far talking to people that have had him as a judge to hear horror stories about Brinkmeyer and corruption stories.
Yeah.
As Brinkmeyer, was it Brinkmeyer is also the one that was sleeping with his secretary? The secretary got fired, but Brinkmeyer stayed?
I believe that's the case.
I believe so. I believe that that's what I was told.
Wow.
Yep.
There's a lot of funny stuff going on there with the law enforcement
in Carroll County.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's like a big swingers club. That's
You
a big
guys
swingers
think this
club there.
everywhere.
Well, you want to know what else is a little weird to me is, since the whole Jackson situation happened, and everything, and the officers that were involved. So the mayor of Savannah spoke out.
Chris Lane, the former mayor, right?
Yeah, the former mayor. Yeah.
Where is our mayor? Why isn't he spoke out? Where is his apology? Where's all his,
Well, and the mayor you're speaking about, Val Gunnarsson, he's also a former judge before Brinkmeyer.
Yes, absolutely.
They have this promote from within. A cop becomes a county board member. The judge becomes the mayor. The mayor becomes the Senate minority leader, House minority leader for the whole state. There's like a promote from within. I believe it's corruption related, people who are on board with their program. And it's really, you could see there's something strange going on. If you look at these people's progression, you have cops becoming county board members. In Warren, you have a cop that was accused of all sorts of corruption. Now he's the mayor. You have, the Savannah, the former judge as the mayor. The mayor from before him stepped down, but that mayor before that is now the House leader for the state of Illinois. And it's just, I believe that, they're keeping their people and they promote them in their corruption group. And I think that's,
well, you can find the Carroll County Republican Women Committee online. It's on IllinoisSunshine.com. Look that up, and you can see where the state senator, the state rep, the Savannah mayor, the state's attorney, the wife of the sheriff, county board members, they all donate to each other. So, like, all you have to do is follow the money. I'm not accusing anybody, but it's there in black and white where you can print it off and say, hey, are you donating to each other to stay in office? Because we need to get other people to run against them if that's the case, because you guys are just shaking hands and you donate to this person to stay in office and this person donates to you to stay in office, and nothing's going to change if other people don't step up and say, hey, at least I want to run for office. I want to run for circuit clerk. I want to run for city council. I want to run for state senator or whatever, and it's going to be a extremely difficult area to even try to get in the door because they're so connected to each other, and they've done this for so long. Like the sheriff clipping was appointed and then elected. Yep. State's attorney
there's a lot of those.
Was appointed and then elected. And they don't look outside the box. They look in like within and be like, hey, you've been here for 10 years. Oh, cool. Here's your promotion. Rubber stamp it, and the way they go. Like I've been to city council or the county board members, and I said, if these people get fired or resign, please look in Iowa, Nebraska, Ohio for somebody that can fit, that doesn't live in the area that's like, oh, the revolving door of hey, you worked over here in the next town over, come on in, we'll shake your hand. And like, no, you guys know each other. It's too connected.
Yep.
Now with Melissa, when they found the vehicle, do you know who the first officer was that responded to the vehicle?
I do not. I had not even sent a FOIA to Stevenson County except for Jeff Hammer's case, and that was 50 plus pages of records.
Yeah, Dennis, what he's saying too is that Melissa's vehicle was not found in Carroll County. So she was last seen in Carroll County at Derek's mother's house. Her vehicle was found in Stevenson County, which is just right across the line from Carroll County, and of course found on Bolton Road, which is the same road that Derek Hammer's dad was found murdered on, and that there's several other extremely suspicious deaths. There was another missing person from Bolton Road. He was found as a suicide, and there is blatant. They say there's no connections to the disappearance and suicide when they found him 2 months later of Cole Shoney, but there's very provable on paper connections, and it's connections to an airplane hangar. It's connections to Bolton Road. It's connections to some businesses. And it's documented connections. These aren't just like theoretical connections. It's connections. Derek Hammer's Uncle Joe Hammer bought the land where the hangar's at from Cole Shoney's. Is his grandpa Kent Shoney, or is it his uncle? And then the guy that found Cole Shoney's body is now the owner of the land, which it's really bizarre because the owner, there's like overlapping ownership. It basically shows about 4 owners at the hangar, and it also shows the person who owns the airport itself, not the land around it, but the airport is Dwayne Sneak. It showed this up to last year, the middle of 2023. Dwayne Sneak, also committed suicide allegedly. Believe, honestly, my personal opinion, I think Dwayne Sneak was murdered. I think Cole Shoney was murdered. I think all of it ties back to the drugs and corruption. And I believe they left the actual airport with the FAA. I believe they left that in Dwayne Sneak's name because nobody wants to put their name on an airport they're flying drugs in and out of. Who better to leave it in whose name than a guy who's been dead for 11, 12 years? So there's so much bizarre stuff going on there that just, how can a dead guy be responsible for, owning and running an airport, managing? It says FAA records show manager Dwayne Sneak, owner Dwayne Sneak, but Dwayne Sneak doesn't own the land. It's overlapping ownership with Brett and Brad Wiesner and Derek's uncle Joe Hammer. And who would they buy the land from? From a Shoney. So it's I believe all of them are involved in I believe it's drugs, and I believe it's, they're flying stuff around. I think they're probably flying, contraband, money, drugs, stuff like that.
Now, I did submit a FOIA a while back ago in regards to the airport and certain information. They just responded a few days ago that they needed an extension. So now we're looking at February 7th. By the time they can have it all put together and sent over.
Awesome. I can't wait to see what that looks like, Dennis. I am so glad that you did that. I'm really hoping that there's something in there, they want to cover up what was on the cameras there, which the cameras did have Melissa's vehicle pulling in behind that hangar. And they want to say, well, we see Derek drive in there. He drives behind a shed. He's there for 5 minutes. He fishtails through the ditch on the way out of there, less than 5 minutes. And this is like shortly after his mother called 911 and ran Derek out of her house, and he's fleeing with tarps and Christmas tree bags and folding tables. And of course, where does he go? He goes to the hangar, and cadaver dogs.
Can you
and that's in Ogle County. And that's, And that's an entire, so she's last seen in Carroll County, right, at Derek's mother's house officially, right, officially, because also people were saying she was seen at Derek's cousin's apartment in Mount Carroll. But then her vehicle's abandoned in Stevenson County, but then her vehicle was also in Ogle County at the hangar. So you got evidence in 3 different counties, you know, and I believe that that's also intentional, because to throw off an investigation, because I think, you know, these jurisdictions, you know, first of all, I believe they're all part of the corruption, but then at the same time, they don't work well together. They don't share information well with each other. And I think that they also have some ego matching too, you know, and some blaming. You know, we've had this from the beginning where Stevenson County will say, oh, this is Carroll County's fault and this is Carroll County, but Melissa's vehicle was found in Stevenson County. So I think Stevenson County is also responsible too. And if she was at the hangar and cadaver dogs hit at the hangar and her truck was at the hangar that Derek was driving, I think Ogle County has some responsibility too. But they all kind of shuffle the responsibility onto the other counties. And I think it's just a cop-out. You know, I think it's their way of passing the buck as far as the blame is concerned.
Kara, also,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
I was gonna say, could you just kind of walk through that timeline? Because at least that part of the story, you know, like where she was last seen at the mother's house, and like the time, like what day, what time, because it sounds like she's in through different counties, but I'm just not clear on exactly when each step happened. If you can kind of walk through each one, and I know that'd be a couple other questions too.
Yep. So, okay, Melissa officially was seen at Derek's mother's house by Derek's mother. And she said around 11:30, she went to go to bed. Both Derek and Melissa were at her house. Also, just to throw this out there, that the mother had bonded Derek out when Derek threatened Melissa with a gun in front of our children a month and 20 days prior to this. There was a no contact order written into the bond. The mother was facilitating contact between Derek and Melissa in her own home. Melissa had actually been at Denise's house on and off for the past couple weeks. So that night, Denise goes to bed at 11:30. Derek's mother, Denise, goes to bed at 11:30. Melissa's there with Derek, of course, in violation of a no contact order, because Melissa's a victim that just had Derek beat her up a month and 20 days before and point a gun at her. So when Denise goes to sleep, now this is where things get really bizarre. There's multiple witnesses saying, and Renee can probably attest to this because Renee's really familiar with Stephen Dapkus's apartment. Renee took the pictures of Stephen's floor. And so Stephen's neighbors are saying Melissa was there. Pat Hartman, even Jessica Boyer and Jessica Maves, Corrine Wallace's sister-in-law. And I want to think, there was more. There's like probably 2 or 3 more. It's a big apartment building. Tony, I mean, a lot of people said Melissa was there. There's even people saying Melissa was bleeding from her head there, and she'd been assaulted in Stephen Dapkus's bathroom. And so now that would be that they showed up there around midnight, is what people were saying. Midnight, 12:30, which it's about a 25-mile drive from Derek's mother's house to Stephen Dapkus's apartment in Mount Carroll. Then Pat Hartman and Jessica Maves both said at 2 or 2:30 in the morning, 2 or 3 vehicles fled out of Stephen Dapkus's apartment building at a high rate of speed, kind of kicking up gravel. They were like, you know, somebody was really stepping on the accelerator, it sounds like. And so from that point, the next, you know, in timeline wise, the next thing is 4 a.m., 4:30 in the morning, Denise Hammer is woken up in her house. And we believe that Derek probably was at his cousin's house. And that's why the next morning, the cousin started ripping out his linoleum kitchen floor. But then we believe either Melissa was assaulted or Melissa was killed at Stevens, and then she was taken back to the mother's house. I believe Derek thought he could get away with doing whatever he wanted to in the basement there. Now, mind you, this is another thing I want to make clear. Melissa's truck never ever left the mother's house from that 11:30. This is GPS backtrack too. They backtracked her GPS in her rental vehicle. Her vehicle never left the mother's house from that 11:30 when the mother went to sleep until 4:30 in the morning. We believe Melissa was taken in somebody else's car, and that somebody is probably Jay Rhodes or Jason Niesman, who are two other, suspects. To us, the cops don't want to name them as suspects, but we've got a lot of information from people that have come forward and placed them being involved with this. So 4:30 in the morning, Denise Hammer wakes up to some sort of noise and tries to go down into, there's a lower level of her house, as Derek's room is in the lower level. Derek would not allow her into basically like the basement of her house. He refused her entry and wouldn't let her go down into her own basement and told her to go upstairs and go back to bed. But instead, she called 911 several times. Allegedly, we've heard from people that have heard from people who have knowledge, people in the system, I don't want to name any names, but that Denise Hammer makes some very incriminating statements. I did have a police officer tell me, a Stevenson County police officer tell me one thing that was said, and I'll say this because this officer did tell me, and it's the Stevenson County Lieutenant Brad Curtis said one thing that he heard on the recording, I believe 911 recording, is, Derek, I can't unsee this. And I believe that the mother saw Melissa's body. I can't unsee this, Derek. Whatever, I believe that is, that she'd seen. Someone else told me that Denise on these 911 calls is expressing concern for Melissa, allegedly, right? I say alleged because that I don't know. I wasn't told that by a cop, but I was told that by somebody that talked to somebody with a high enough level position that is what they said. And I believe the mother initially wanted to cooperate. I think Denise Hammer initially did want to cooperate. But then what I believe is that at some point in time, Denise Hammer realized this isn't the first murder that's happened connected to their family. And this isn't the first murder that's been covered up, because Derek's dad was murdered in 2008. Derek was the last person to officially speak to his dad, allegedly. Even the newspaper articles, and this is now mind you, it's a cold case, unsolved homicide. Also happened, Derek's dad was found on the same road that Derek and his friend Jason Niesman are known by police to have abandoned Melissa's vehicle on the same road, on Bolton Road. And Bolton Road is also connected to these other, not all of them, but a couple other suspicious deaths with multiple connections to Melissa. So I think that Denise realized that if she told on Derek for Melissa's case, that Derek is going to tell on her, and probably Fred Cass, because that's who I believe covered up Jeff Hammer's murder. And I think there's some pretty good documentation indicating that. And I believe Denise Hammer, and this is an officer, Fred Cass, the former chief of police of Mount Carroll and current chief of police in Elizabeth, Illinois. We have some documentation that Todd here got in a FOIA request from Jeff Hammer's cold case homicide file. And it names the officer as allegedly being responsible for covering up Jeff Hammer's murder. So I think Denise wanted to cooperate.
He called Fred Cass John Gotti Jr., like he could make things happen in the police report.
Said he could have a person killed with a phone call. You know, he's involved, and they talk about him being involved in organized crime. And they talk about him, you know, being able to have people killed, whacked, whatever, like mafia style. But they're talking about an officer. And this is from the cold case homicide file of Jeff Hammer. So I believe the mother was scared. Denise Hammer was scared of Derek, scared of what he was doing. I believe initially she wanted to stop whatever was happening, and she called 911 on him. Then I think she realized that if she turns Derek in for Melissa, Derek can say, well, my mother helped me cover up my father's murder, and had Fred Cass come in and cover up my father's murder. And I believe that that's where Denise Hammer did a 180, and she quit cooperating, because that's what the police from Stevenson County, that's what the lieutenant said she was cooperating initially. Then she did a 180 and she lawyered up. And eventually she even went to a grand jury. And I've been told by the same officer that the officer said he was upset, said he was pissed that Denise Hammer changed her story. So I believe one cover-up leads to another cover-up, you know. Now, Derek can tell on them about covering up his father's murder. So now they got to cover up Melissa's murder.
Then when did her car leave Denise's house then? When did that truck? So at 4:30, right. After that point.
Yep, after she called 911. I think she called 911 twice, at least twice is what I've been told. So at that point, Derek fled the house. Denise has said this. As a matter of fact, she's on a recording. Melissa's sister, Mandy, has a friend who happened to be in the park in Shannon one day, bumped into Denise Hammer, turned on her phone to record, and recorded like 45 minutes of a conversation with Denise Hammer. Denise Hammer says Derek left with tarps or Christmas tree bags and her nice folding table. She actually complained about him leaving. She didn't complain about what he did to Melissa on this recording. She complained about him taking her nice folding tables. You know, and that says she's calling 911. I believe that he left in a panic because she called 911, and so he headed to that airplane hangar, and I believe he stashed Melissa's body there, where the cadaver dogs hit on 2 separate searches. You know, I also believe that Derek Hammer got arrested by a SWAT team that next morning. And actually, you know, it was reported as a hostage incident at his mother's house. SWAT team surrounds a house. It's reported on the news. It's reported even on Facebook. I've never seen anything like that on Facebook before. But there was pictures of tanks and helicopters outside of Denise Hammer's home in Shannon, you know, and it looked like a military action. And when they come for Derek, that's how they come, because this guy has shooting cases. Obviously, he's a suspect in murders, and he is also, and like I said, this is public record. He's the only person I've ever heard of who literally held a hostage with bombs. And that was in 2017 in, I believe, Carson City, Nevada. And he did prison time for that. And so
in that case, in Nevada, according to the police report, he was setting up like propane booby tank traps where you open a door and a propane tank would go off. Like the police saw 20-pound propane tanks behind like at least two or three doors, and you're not even supposed to have a 20-pound propane tank in your house.
The police report actually called those IED explosives, like what you hear about in Afghanistan or Iraq. That's what it says in the actual report. It says Derek made improvised explosive devices and planted them all around the house in Carson City, Nevada. He only did 2 years. You know, I think if slap on the wrist for shooting at a police officer's girlfriend the year after his father was murdered. He shot at a girlfriend then as she was fleeing their home in Pearl City, and slap on the wrist. Holds a hostage with bombs, slap on the wrist. Kills his father. Mommy calls Fred Cass. They cover it up. And, you know, and now they're covering up Melissa's death. I believe that he is beyond dangerous. I think he's one of those people that should never, ever be free on our streets again. Ever. But you know what? His mother is enabling him, you know, gets him the best attorneys, bails him out. I mean, he was on bond when Melissa disappeared. And like I said, there was a no contact order for him pointing a gun at Melissa in front of our kids a month and 20 days prior. But you know what? These people have enabled him. Law enforcement has enabled him. The judicial system has enabled him, you know, without any concern for public safety. And I just believe it is a huge, huge shortcoming.
Now,
Yeah, well,
going back to
man.
the cadaver dogs at the airplane hangar, do you know who the dog handlers were? And did they ever dig there where the dogs hid on?
I don't believe that they did there. We also went to like a rock quarry. So I went on, there was a big search by the police, by law enforcement, with cadaver dogs initially, that they didn't allow Melissa's search teams, because we formed our own search teams. And so the first one was cops only. And the cadaver dogs hit in one spot, but it was the same cadaver dog handlers both times. The first initial search, and then the second search was law enforcement plus Melissa's family and friends and search team and volunteers from Facebook. So the second one, the cadaver dogs hit in the same spot at the hangar. I also was told that they may have indicated on the hangar itself too. And I remember people telling us that they had. But of course, like Dennis is saying, they did not dig there. They did dig out at the rock quarry that was a few miles away from the hangar. But the hangar itself, I don't know that anybody ever dug there. And the two searches, like the first law enforcement search and then the second law enforcement search with Melissa's search team, those were a lot of months apart. Those weren't just like, you know, a couple days apart. Those were probably like 6 months apart, maybe 7, 8 months apart from each other. And the cadaver dogs still hit in the same spot 6, 7, 8 months later, you know?
Was the spot inside the hangar or outside?
It was like, so on there's a scrambled video that the cops unscrambled because the video had been rewritten over itself because it was on like a 30-day loop. And they didn't get the videos till after the 30 days, and it was supposedly, you know, scrambled and rewritten over. But there's programs, I guess, they can pull that stuff up. So they say they can see Derek pull in. He drives behind the shed that the airplane's in. And then he's there for maybe 5 minutes. And then they said they saw him fishtail through the ditch on his way out of there. You know, and they believe that's where the dogs hit, is where he drove back behind the shed. And right next to the shed, there's like a giant, huge, I don't know what it is, if it's like chemicals for the crop duster airplanes, or it might even be just fuel for the crop duster airplanes, but it is a big tank. It's huge. But, and just in case anybody's asking, we did kind of look at the tank and see if there was any way that there's like an opening big enough to fit a person into or any of that, and it didn't look like that. It only looked like maybe you could fit some type of hose or something like that into it. But next to the tank, next to the shed that the plane is kept in, is where the cadaver dogs hit. You know, and like I said, on multiple occasions, and each time it was multiple dogs. So it'd be like 3 or 4 dogs the first time, 3 or 4 dogs the second search. You know, so pretty good. I believe a pretty good indicator. The cadaver dog handlers I know that I talked with on the second search, we're pretty confident that Melissa's body, at the very least, had been laid there, you know. And so, and I believe that. And I believe that the evidence from the video of Derek driving behind the hangar supports that. I believe that that's a little better than just a working theory. I think it's, you know, more probable than not. So
right, with the time frame that he was back there, he obviously wouldn't have had enough time to have buried a body back there to dig a hole or even just to fill it in. So laying her on the ground there is feasible, or possibly evidence of a murder. Alex, we've had a lot of discussions on this angle of the case. You know, what are you thinking right now?
I mean, at this point, my personal thoughts are that that she was taken to the airport. I mean, there's evidence of her being there. Correct, Benny? I personally believe she left there. This is just my thought, and this is, you know, things that I've thought of that we've kind of thrown around and discussed. But, you know, I believe she left in a plane that night or the next day, at some point, and it was either, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful by any means, but she either left as a whole or she left in parts, and she was pushed out of the plane either in a certain area or parts here and parts there and parts here. Because, I mean, if these tables disappeared, I mean, what would be the whole point of these tables being taken? You know? But, I mean, of course, everybody would want anybody in this situation to come home. But, I mean, the logical thing, it sounds like, is if the evidence and the proof says she was there within, you know, what stuff has been provided, I believe she left the airport that night, you know. And if we're able to obtain records from, you know, the FAA, whoever, for flight logs, you know, call tower logs, I mean, that would kind of be the proof in the pudding that night or the next day. She possibly, I don't want to say they took care of the problem, but she either left in the middle of the night or the next day possibly, and she was hidden that next day till the next day. You know, I mean, that's just, to me, what I think, the stuff I've watched and read and your discussions and everything we talked about the last episode, that's kind of where I feel things possibly went and what happened, you know, which is sad. It's truly heartbreaking. You know, it should have never, ever, ever got to that point, you know?
No.
So.
Seeing the FOIA request I put in, if they do send all of this, it will have all of those records in there as well.
And I think awesome. I really think if we get those records, and, you know, it's going to be something that's either going to tell us, hey, you need to keep looking now at this scenario. Where did that plane fly? You know, how long was it gone? How far could it have gone in that time period? You know, what could there be the lake, a river, just thrown out above farm fields and wooded areas? I mean, there's so many different things that this could have gone. You know, how, if this is what happened to her, you know. And it's just, it's so sad. It really is. And I'm really sorry.
So I have a quick question
point there too. You know, she could have been hidden till the next day at Stevens and then moved.
Then that's possible too. Yep. And maybe it was just evidence at the hangar, but I believe that there's a good possibility. My thought, and now this I would say is theory. I believe that Melissa was assaulted at Stevens. I believe that Melissa bled at Stevens. I believe that there was DNA from at least an injury at Stevens, and that's why he ripped out his linoleum kitchen floor. I do also think Steven is a bit of a coward. That's just my personal take on Steven. He's not as, he's a scumbag, but I don't think he's as cold, calculated, or evil as Derek is. I could be wrong, but that's my take on him. Is I think it's possible that when Derek started assaulting Melissa, Steven might have told Derek, get the fuck out of my, excuse my language, but get the fuck out of my place. And Derek took Melissa back towards the mother's house. And that would be, obviously before the mother woke up, to whatever Derek was doing in that basement. But Adam, I also believe that the tables, like you mentioned the tables too. I think that, I hunt and I butcher deer, and it's a lot easier to butcher a deer on a table and, than on the ground. And I think I've always believed that, as awful as it is to even think about being realistic, I believe that those tables were used so that Derek could try and dismember Melissa. And there's no telling how far he got into that before his mom caught him and he left her house. Whatever happened at the hangar, I truly believe Derek got arrested before he could finish the job. I don't think for 1 second Derek is the one that came back and got Melissa's body. I don't believe that. I don't think the timeline before he gets arrested. So after the hangar, Derek leaves the hangar. He goes back to his mother's house. I believe he was trying to smooth things over with his mother or remove more evidence of Melissa being there or DNA. He goes back to his mother's house for a few more minutes. I think mom is still telling him, I called 911. He leaves again. He goes to his friend Jason Niesman's house. And then the vehicle from Jason Niesman's house, it's only there for, I think it's less than 5 minutes is what I heard. I think it was like 2 or 3 minutes. Then it went to Bolton Road where it was abandoned at. Now, another thing that they didn't press Jason Niesman about, mind you, Jason Niesman, who was that morning seen crying and hysterical and saying his 2 best friends are going to prison for life. But Jason Niesman lied and said Derek had shown up at his house, 4:35 in the morning, walking. The GPS data in Melissa's truck showed that was a lie. Derek showed up in Melissa's vehicle. And when you drive the route from Niesman's to where her vehicle was abandoned, and you see and you think about, there was somebody drove by that morning, a person who lived on the road. They saw, they saw people in Melissa's vehicle. And they said they saw 2 silhouettes in Melissa's vehicle. And this is it's got to be like 5 or 5:30 in the morning. And they said, well, it looked suspicious, but they thought, it's October. They thought maybe somebody was hunting, because it's in a rural area. So that same person, I believe, if I'm remembering this correctly, is also the person who called the truck in, because I think they saw the truck on their way to work. And then when they came back from work, the truck was still there. That's when they called and reported the truck. And then I believe Stevenson County Police went out there. And then they also allegedly found I think when the Stevenson County Police went there, they found, cards with the Wisconsin police officer who'd questioned Melissa the day before about Derek Hammer driving her vehicle in a high-speed chase 2 weeks prior, when he has already had a no-contact order with Melissa. But he was in a high-speed chase and he outran the cops. So the cops were really upset and they were looking for Melissa for 2 weeks. And she was ducking the cops. She wasn't even going home. She was going to Denise Hammer's house. Of course, she's in Denise Hammer's house in violation of a no contact order that's written right into the bond when Derek assaulted her and pointed a gun at her. You know, and I believe the mother facilitated that contact. I believe that the mother, like when they talk about responsibility, I believe that she's responsible for allowing Derek to bring Melissa to her house and allowing them to be there and spend the nights there while Melissa was ducking the police that wanted her to tell them, admit that Derek was driving her truck in this high-speed chase. So the cops knew they could catch up with Melissa. Melissa had a custody hearing for custody. She lost custody on a temporary basis over the gun incident. And because there was drugs in the house and because they felt like, you know, Derek pointed this gun at Melissa in front of our kids. It's a dangerous environment. You know, what I believe, the same thing too. You know, the Child Protective Service and the judge removed Melissa's custody. So Melissa had a hearing the day before she disappeared, and her mother was with her. 2 Wisconsin cops pulled her aside when she was leaving that hearing, and they asked her, you know, to tell on Derek for driving her vehicle in a high-speed chase, you know, and also in violation of their no contact order. So when they left, I believe the detective must have given Melissa his business card. When Stevenson County came and found the vehicle, I think they found the Greene County, Wisconsin's business card, the Greene County detective, and they called and they said, "What's going on?" And he said, "Well, this is my, you know, victim / witness." And that kind of also, you know, aside from the SWAT team presence, which probably happened even earlier in the day than I believe that the vehicle was found, you know, the SWAT team at Derek's mother's house. And that was because Wisconsin had already put out a warrant for Derek's arrest for violating that no contact order. So they went to his mother's house to pick him up. And like I said, now Derek, who has these bombings and shootings and he's a suspect in other murders, when they come for Derek, they're not sending 2 uniformed cops. They're sending a damn army after him. You know, it looks like and this also, when Melissa's house was raided in Wisconsin a month and a half prior for the gun incident, when Derek assaulted her and pointed a gun at her, even Wisconsin came like a military operation. They sent a SWAT team. It was like 6, 7, 8 different jurisdictions and tanks, helicopters, the same kind of thing that they did at his mother's house a month and a half later. So within 2 months, he got picked up by the SWAT team twice. And, you know, it's like a military operation when they come for him because of his history with bombs and shootings. So, you know, just a failure. I don't know. A failure on the part of them to keep Melissa safe. A failure on the part of them when my kids were in the house with Melissa to keep my kids safe. And then when my son went to school and told the teacher, and then he told the Child Protective Service and cops that Derek had assaulted his mother and pointed a gun at her, you know, my son was trying to protect his mother. And I believe that they failed my children. You know, they failed my son. My son wanted to, you know, if they would have just held Derek in jail and not given him a bond, you know, what's he doing with guns? This guy has shootings, kidnappings with bombs, you know, hostage situation with bombs, shootings. He gets found with guns in Melissa's house. His DNA and fingerprints, also the Greene County, Wisconsin district attorney, Craig Nolan, said that Derek Hammer's DNA and his fingerprints were all over the guns, and especially the gun that my son saw him pointing at his mother. So my son knows well enough to protect his mother by reporting the incident, but law enforcement, you know, couldn't protect Melissa any better than this. From this this guy's a Fruit Loop, you know. He shoots at women, he holds hostages with bombs, he's a suspect in his dad's murder, and it's just a failure on, I don't know, it's law enforcement all the way around. I'll say it, not just Illinois law enforcement failed Melissa, Wisconsin law enforcement failed Melissa, And I really, truly, and they failed my children too, because now my children have to live the rest of their lives without their mother. And so it really, honestly, when I think about it, it really hurts to think that they could have put a stop to all this. And here's some other failures. Derek was on parole from Nevada from, this 2017 hostage with bombs situation. He got caught with a drug house in Stevenson County, Illinois. Then he got caught for a couple DUIs. He gets caught with the guns. They never revoked his Nevada parole. So Nevada has enabled him too. And it's a failure on the state of Nevada to not have revoked his parole. He gets caught with another drug house. Where'd he hold the hostage in Nevada? He held her hostage in a drug house, his girlfriend there with the bombs. That was a drug house too. So he's on parole for a hostage in a drug house. He gets caught with another drug house in Illinois where he's, sent back. The parole board sends him back to Illinois in the care of his mother, under his mother's watchful eyes. She's going to keep Derek out of trouble. She's going to keep him on the right track. Less than a year later, he's caught with a drug house. Well, does Illinois tell Nevada that, you need to extradite Derek back to Nevada to finish his parole in prison? He got caught with another drug house? No. I just really think that there's been so many times that the judicial system, the parole board, the cops in Wisconsin, the cops in Illinois could have stopped this guy. For some reason, they really truly seem to want him on the streets. They wanted to protect him in his dad's murder. They want to cover up Melissa's murder. They want to, I don't know. I think his mother, whatever hold she has over the corrupt people in Illinois, her, whatever she's doing for these corrupt people in Illinois, they are willing to help her at any cost keep her son on the streets, even though her son is literally the most dangerous person I've ever really heard about. It's a suspect in multiple murders. Guy shoots at a cop's daughter 2009 and holds hostages with bombs. It's just not even, this is somebody that should never ever see the streets and should be in prison until he gets old and dies in prison. And I just think it's just a failure all the way around. I don't know. I know I'm rambling, so I'm going to pass the mic here. But
and Corrine had a question for us. Are we going to come out and what are we going to do to look for Melissa further? I do want to come out there and do some searches for Melissa. One of the things we're waiting for is the information from the FOIA report. And we're looking at a few other things with that as well. But I do definitely want to come out at some point and do some searches for her. I think she can be. But at the same time, I also agree with Alex that I think there's a really good chance they may have taken her away in an airplane. Where to or how far? So hopefully the information from the FOIA will help paint a better picture with that. But I definitely want to search for her.
I think that will help us. I think this will help us on our behalf of trying to figure out what to do, what to look at, where to get an idea of how to move forward with what we do, because we kind of do something, it's called like the 50-50, and it's something that Dennis and I have, we've really discussed for a long time, and how we look at different accusations, rumors, what does the evidence point to? What does all the mouth running lead to? And it's basically, if we can get this information, these reports, that'll give us an idea of, okay, legitimately, this could be she did leave on a plane. There was a plane that left that night. There was a plane that left early the next morning. that'll give us a start to say, okay, do we need to focus on the point that she could have left and been, pushed out, dropped parts here, parts there? And I apologize for using those words. But, to basically look at these different things and get ideas of, what to do. I mean, of course, we just don't want to show up and be like, okay, well, let's go look over here. I mean, we got to have an idea of, A to Z, 1 to 100. Where do we start? Where do we want to end up with what evidence, what, points to things that could be true? This is more realistic. This is absolute BS. There's no way this could have happened. We just narrow things down. And so, right now, I think the most important thing is what we're doing right now. We're discussing stuff. We're talking about it. We're working through it. And then this foyer, however you say that word, but those records, once we get that stuff and we can see, what happened at the airport that night, what happened that next day, if we can work through that stuff and get ideas from that, then we can start moving forward with, well, how do we execute, this? Well, where do we think this might have happened, Because if something doesn't turn up, if nothing comes from basically those reports, then we have to look somewhere else at something.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've had numerous, I've assembled numerous search teams, and I have searched, like, I don't even know how many man hours I have put in myself. Months and months and months, and of every day going out from morning until dark. I mean, and it's been endless. And I kind of stepped back a little bit here for a while because there was so much chatter going on that I wasn't sure what was what at that point. I started to go, okay, well, I got to question this, and I got to question this, and I got to look at this, and I got to step back a little bit and say, okay, well, what is the next step that I need to do? What is the next thing? So I put myself, in Stephen's apartment. I did a lot of talking with him. I took pictures of his apartment. I took pictures of the floor as he was ripping it up. I've got pictures of everything. There has been, like Benny said, some things that have come to light that he's looking at charges here probably soon for the death of Melissa. No body homicide, but the fact that, her body has not been found is it's kind of concerning. But at the same time, I have been through that apartment and that apartment complex multiple times. Even before the fire started there, which happened this last summer, there was no electricity on the floor, but and hadn't been for, oh my God, for years. There hadn't been anything on the fourth floor, no electricity at all. But the fact that the fire started on the fourth floor due to Stephen trying to...
That's what the neighbor said.
Yep, he's trying to tap into the electric. There's an antenna wire or an antenna module that goes up, and there's a wire that connects to it that is live. And he was trying to tap into that from the fourth floor to run down to his apartment for electricity, but he back routed the wires and caused the fire. So,
or is there the possibility, Renee, that he purposely tried to start the fire? Because the neighbors say that Stephen started the fire and then he left the building. He was on the fourth floor, fire breaks out on the fourth floor, it's abandoned. There's no, People lived on the first, second, and third floors. The roof on the fourth floor leaked, so nobody lived on the fourth floor. And what Renee's saying, what the neighbors say, that they shut off the power to the fourth floor. Stephen's up there. The neighbors say he's up there. Next thing you know, it bursts into flame. Stephen leaves the building. His mother shows up. He gets in the car and drives away with her. And so, is there any?
He was using one of those electric heaters is what he was trying to do. He used an electric heater to start it. So that's how it happened. He used the electric heater to start it.
Yeah.
And I just, I've been to the apartment recently, and in the last few weeks and month, I've been going over every square inch of that apartment. They were supposed to have brought crime scene out there or forensics out there to go through the apartment and do forensics. They never did that. Crime scene never came out. Forensics never came out. So
I had text messages begging that. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but I'll let you go ahead, Renee. I'm sorry about that.
That's okay.
Sometimes I break things. I don't mean to.
That's okay. I went out and done my own forensics. I collected samples of the floor, of the stains, the blood stains on the wall. I collected various things and turned that into the labs. Into the sheriff's department for labs. So I'm assuming, and I say assuming because I don't know this for sure, but speculating that this is the reason why they may have been able to bring charges. I don't know. I know the case is still ongoing. I don't even know if I was supposed to say anything about that, but it's out there anyway. So, but Stephen's apartment is, I had called the day that I found out he was redoing his flooring, which was Benny's right. It was the night after Melissa went missing. I went straight out there, talked to Stephen. There is a stain on the floor, a good sized stain on the floor. And I went to school for law enforcement, forensics, crime scene, I'm very good at collecting those things and doing that stuff. So, and investigations. So, I collected a lot of the samples. I did take pictures of everything. I have pictures now. If there are any pictures that you guys would like to have, you're more than welcome to give me a site or something I can put them on, or an email I can send them to. So I guess we'll have to see from there. But and also in reference to her vehicle on Bolton Road. Now, I searched that area right across the street from the road from where her truck was abandoned. And I found, because I was also a hunter and my son, I found that there were 2 or 3 trail cams in that tree line that pointed toward that road. You can clearly see that one of those trail cams could have caught who was there and the truck. And I expressed that to the officers when I spoke with them. they said they would go and talk to the person or find out who owned the property and talk to them and see if they could look at the trail cams. So I got a response back a couple weeks later, and they said, well, there was nothing on the trail cams. They couldn't find anything on the trail cams. Now, I kind of find that a little hard to believe, because there's no way that trail cam could not have caught that truck. I mean, it was right in line with it. There's no way. It was right on the edge of the tree line. There's no way it could not have caught something unless it was not active. But it looked active to me.
Yeah, that sounds a little fishy, for sure.
Yeah,
So,
the other-
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, did the other trail cams? I mean, they maybe were they pointed towards the road so they could have seen something coming or going.
The other two trail cams were well, the one, like the tree line is right here facing the road. The one was facing this way, another one was facing back this direction. So the other one could have possibly caught someone coming from the Shannon route, coming from the way that they had parked the vehicle on the right-hand side of the road. So yeah, they could have. It could have.
So you followed up with Stevenson County or Carroll County?
It would have been, I believe it was Carroll County.
Okay, because that area in Bolton Road is Stevenson County.
Yeah.
Yes. But at that point, the Carroll County sheriffs were out there with the dogs. And they, that's who I spoke with. And I can't remember the officer's name now. And I did have it wrote down in my other notebook, but for some reason, when I went to find my notebook tonight, I could not find that specific notebook. Also, I drove probably, I'd gotten some other information from somebody else who knew the Hammers, and said that they had some other property or had family or something on some other property that was in Pecatonica, by Duck Misery Marsh.
Yep.
I also searched there by myself. I went. I was there for probably 3 hours, following up with, people that were there. I talked to a Dave and I talked to a Kurt. And I also spoke with a woman, and I want to say her name was Lori Petty or Petter.
Peters? Lori Peters?
Lori Peters. Yeah, Lori Peters.
That's Niesman's, the lady that hid Niesman out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, she said that, well, she spoke to me, and she said that she thought that Derek may have, Derek and Jason Rhodes may have been the ones that I believe, in my opinion, that Jason Rhodes,
Yep.
some point had Melissa in Courtney's car, because there's forensic evidence that shows that Melissa was in that car. They found her the fibers from her weave, and I believe there was some DNA evidence as well, but and I also spoke with somebody else just recently who gave me a new name that we didn't even look for. Brad Eleanor is another one that I believe is involved or could be involved, because he is a truck driver. And also Frank Brown is the other name.
Yep. The neighbor of Stephen Dapkus.
Yes. Well.
Yep. He was former neighbor. He was a neighbor of Stephen Dapkus at that time when at Stephen's apartment.
Yeah. He had some property out off Daggett Road here, going toward Lanark. That Mark, a guy they knew that Stephen knew. Stephen asked him if he would take him out to Frank's property. And this was probably a couple days after Melissa went missing. So a couple days or a day after Melissa went missing as well. And he said it was off Daggett Road going toward Lanark. And he said it was way back in there. Now, Courtney made the statement that, which is Jason Rhodes' girlfriend at the time, that when her vehicle came back, it was all full of mud and it was all gunked up. So, and Mark said that this road that they went down to go to Frank's place, you had to go down a dirt, muddy road like that. I mean, it would be gravel and then it would start, and then it would end up mud. And it was, just like, it was really bad, and it was far back in there. And he said all that was in there was like a barn or garage or something like that, just a little outbuilding. So, and I know Frank does concrete work. So, and I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking that I definitely think that Jay Rhodes was definitely involved.
Well, his children's mother said that he was involved. The next girlfriend that he dated, a bartender from Savannah, said that he was involved. The next girlfriend wouldn't tell us anything. Actually, Todd has a son with this girl, and she's the one dating Jay Rhodes now. She wouldn't tell us anything, but she told her girlfriend, Ashley, that Jay Rhodes was involved, that Jay Rhodes helped get rid of Melissa's body, that he told her that, and he told her that he ran drugs for the Potempas, and that he helped Derek because Derek was his friend. And she told her girlfriend she didn't want to tell on Jay because she thought she loved Jay and thought Jay was a good guy. Another thing I want to, because you were talking about Stephen Dapkus's apartment so much, there's something I want to make clear. When you said you asked the cops to send evidence technicians to Stephen Dapkus's apartment, we also asked the cops, the David Mercado, the detective on Melissa's case, to send evidence technicians to Stephen Dapkus's apartment. I have text messages. Now, I still have them. I saved them. David Mercado tells me Stephen Dapkus lives with his mother. What, is she involved in this too? Which is a lie. Stephen's mother lives across the street from Derek's mother in Shannon. So, and I have that. And he was condescending about it too. And I said, well, he said, what, is she involved in this too? And I said, well, if she's telling you Stephen lives with her or that she lives with Stephen, she is involved because she's lying. And so I have those text messages. I actually had to argue with Mercado about where Dapkus lived because he kept insisting that Dapkus lived with his mother in Shannon. But Mount Carroll's 25 miles away from Shannon. And Stephen lived at that apartment for 2 years after Melissa disappeared. So then when Mercado finally admitted where Stephen Dapkus lived, and that's after arguing with him for a couple days, right? And he's telling me Stephen Dapkus lives with his mother. And I'm like, no, he doesn't. He lives at 155 Mill Road at Mount Carroll at the Century Pines apartment building, which is like a huge project building in the middle of a cornfield. It's a bizarre looking building. But then when he finally admitted it, we begged David Mercado to send evidence technicians, just like Renee here said. She asked them to send evidence technicians to Stephen Dapkus's. So this is David's, and I have this in text messages too. I've saved the phone. I'm not using the phone anymore, but I have it saved. I check it from time to time to make sure the messages are still on there. They are still on my phone. I have them. And he says, we sent 2 detectives to Stephen Dapkus's apartment. If he would have ripped up his floor, they would have noticed it. Renee.
They started sitting outside the building. He had it sitting right outside his apartment. He had a big chunk of the woods right there.
Well, he was throwing the linoleum in the dumpster at the apartment building. So
and down in where they filled in the crematorium as well when they tore it down.
So David Mercado says, we sent 2 detectives. Now, this is after lying about where Stephen lived to begin with, and I got to argue with him to admit where Stephen lived, and he's condescending, saying Stephen lives with his mother. What, is she involved in this too? And then he says, we sent 2 detectives to Stephen Dapkus's house. You can see the pictures Renee took of Stephen Dapkus's floor. Blind cops with blind walking sticks would have missed the linoleum kitchen floor ripped out because it was like layers of flooring, multiple layers of flooring ripped out. Blind cops would have tripped over it. They could have missed it. So absolutely. Then David Mercado refused to go talk to all the neighbors that were saying Melissa was there. Melissa was bleeding from her head.
He told me to send him all the pictures I had of Stephen's apartment and the floor. And I did. Yep. Then he turned around and denied that he even got those photos.
Yep.
When I have emails from his email stating they were sent to him.
Yep. That's David Mercado. That's the detective on Melissa's case. A compulsive liar. That he can't even remember the lies. You talk to him one week, he tells you something. The next week, he tells you something entirely different. This guy couldn't even keep his lies straight. You know, a compulsive liar who can't remember the lie he told you the last time he talked to you.
So I got a question. So in this whole grand scheme of everything that's going on, Renee, I mean, it sounds like you've been to this apartment condo complex. Is there not any cameras? Is there not any Ring doorbells where someone could walk past someone's door? Something? Is there not any of that? Is there not any traffic lights coming in and out of the apartment complex? Intersections? Is there not anything that you all... Is anybody looked into these lights to pull footage to see if she's in a vehicle coming in, she's exiting the vehicle, is the vehicle leaving, and she didn't enter the vehicle, leaving the apartment? Is there any of that stuff? Which, I mean, this would be like first things that people I would think would check all the time, but...
Well, this is the first thing, and you're right. It's the first thing I checked.
Okay.
Now, let me tell you that this is in a rural area. So we have no stoplights in this town. There is no stoplights. Okay. It's all stop signs. There's no stoplights. So it's all back roads mainly and 2-lane highway. So there was a camera system on Stephen's side of the building that looked out towards the parking area for the vehicles for the apartment. Okay. Kelly and Kirk, who were managing the apartment at that time, did have cameras set up there. Now, here's the issue. 2 days before Melissa Trumpy went missing, those cameras suddenly went down. They have no idea how or why.
Oh my
because
word!
they had control of it in their apartment only. It was hooked to their computer, and it was set up through in their apartment. So the only way is somebody had to have clipped the wires or the lines, which was the first thing I checked when I went out there. So where the camera wires ran along the railing and up the side of the apartment complex over to Kelly and Kurt's apartment. Okay. They had 2 cameras on that side, one looking up the stairway and going that also pan arounds and looks at the decking or the walkway there, and the other out constantly facing the apartment parking. Okay, so the one going to the apartment parking and the one going to the only 2 cameras they had over there, somehow the wires got damaged, clipped. Don't know how, but it happened. So
Yeah.
2 days before.
Bad timing.
Yeah, it was bad timing because that was the first thing I checked. I went straight to Kirk and Kelly's apartment and I said, hey, can I possibly look at the cameras from this date on this time? And they said, well, our cameras quit working like 2 days before that. I'm like, what do you mean they just quit working? And she's like, I don't know. They just went black. And Kirk couldn't figure out how or why they're still hooked up. They're, so when you actually look, because the wires ran right below the bottom part of the deck on the 2nd floor, which is where Stephen's apartment, so above that walkway, if you were to look, the wires are ran up along there. So at the very back part of the wires, at the highest point where Kirk and Kelly couldn't get because they're older people, those wires were cut.
That's
Yeah.
Man.
So they, in my opinion, this was all pre-planned. It was premeditated. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. I mean, I'm sure of it.
Now, how long was it that Melissa went to Illinois from the time that she went missing?
So Melissa was okay. Now, remember I told you the cops were looking for Melissa for about 2 weeks to basically to force her into admitting that it was Derek driving her car in his high-speed chase. During that 2 weeks, she wasn't even coming home to her own house in Wisconsin. She was staying at Derek's mother's house in Illinois, but she would drive back to Monroe, Wisconsin, where she worked for Nicole. So during the day, she would be at Nicole's house. At night, she would drive back to Illinois to Derek's mother's house, to Denise's house, because she was trying to avoid the police because she knew that the police were trying to question her about Derek, outrunning them in a high-speed chase. So another thing is the Wisconsin cops, I feel like all the pressure they put on Melissa, it wasn't Melissa that outran them in the high-speed chase, it was Derek. Plus, there was 3 witnesses that were, so Derek outran the police, a month and a half before Melissa disappeared. He points the gun at her, assaults her in front of the kids. He goes to jail. He gets bonded out. In the bond, there's the no contact order. Well, 3 or 4 weeks after that, 2 weeks before Melissa disappears, he's back in Wisconsin. He's driving her truck. The cops get behind him. I think he ran because he's got the no contact order with her. So he outran the police in Greene County, Wisconsin. So when he got away from the cops, but he damaged Melissa's vehicle when he did that, because I think he broke the radiator And then because the radiator was leaking, after he outran the police, the engine seized up. So he's walking around on these backcountry roads asking people, and this guy is like, he's like bald as can be. And I mean like bald with no eyebrows. So he flipping stands out. So he asked a bunch of people for rides back to Melissa's house. They had 3 different witnesses that saw Derek, you know, asking for rides. Then the last witness that he asked for a ride was a teenager, and that teenager was so scared. They said Derek popped out of the woods looking all crazy, you know, he's a tweaker. So he popped out of the woods, asked this kid for a ride. The kid was so scared, he said, I can't give you a ride. My mom has me on Life 360. So then when that kid left, Derek went across the street from that kid's house and stole the neighbor's truck. He drove that truck back out to Melissa's house. So now police show up to Melissa's house, you know, to ask her why is her vehicle in a high-speed chase, and they find a stolen vehicle at her house that Derek stole down the road from where he, you know, abandoned her truck when he blew the engine up. So they didn't need to pressure Melissa to tell on Derek. You know, I think like they should have had him in custody before they pressured her to cooperate, you know, and they already had 3 witnesses. They didn't need Melissa. I think they were just trying to put the icing on their cake, and they, you know, I don't know. I feel like he should have been in custody before they were pressuring her. So that 2 weeks she wasn't coming home, she was staying at Denise's house in Illinois because she knew the cops were looking for her. The cops, realizing she had the custody hearing, you know, they figured, well, we'll just, you know, go next door because the police station's right next door to the courthouse in Monroe, so in Greene County, Wisconsin. So when she had the custody hearing, then the cops grabbed her as she was leaving. She was about to leave the custody hearing, and the cops pulled her and her mother aside and questioned her for 2 hours about Derek in this high-speed chase. Well, that was the day before Melissa disappeared. So Melissa disappeared Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. That was Monday when she left the custody hearing, and they were pressuring her to cooperate against Derek.
And it was
so another
Steve and Derek both that
called Nicole.
Melissa. And
well, they were calling Nicole's phone, her boss, looking for Melissa. And they're like, has Melissa gotten out of court yet? And Nicole said, no, Melissa got arrested. Then shortly after that, Melissa hadn't been arrested. And she wasn't like, okay, so another thing that kind of bothers me is that the media made Melissa out like, okay, Melissa's snitching on Derek. She's this cooperating witness. But the truth is, Melissa was protecting Derek the whole time. When the cops were questioning her, she was, you know, there's been people who've been like, oh, snitches get what they deserve. She was providing information on, you know, there's some evil people out there. And that's one thing that some people were saying, oh, snitches get stitches and this and that. Well, she was protecting him tooth and nail. And she told them that maybe she left her keys in her vehicle and maybe somebody randomly was walking down the highway by her place and stole her vehicle. And that's who was in the high-speed chase. Well, so Derek didn't need to do that to Melissa either because she was trying to protect him. And I just feel like Greene County cops, you know, that they messed up. They should have had Derek in custody. They didn't need Melissa's statement. Melissa wasn't in the high-speed chase. They knew it was Derek. Why did they need Melissa? You know? So I don't know. It just all of it really bothers me. I don't know. I just feel like
sold another vehicle that night too, and was gone for like an hour, and then brought it back.
Yep. The morning she disappeared. Derek stole a vehicle in Shannon, and then brought it back. I think after Jason Niesman had dropped him off after they abandoned Melissa's truck, I think Derek maybe had more evidence or something. He wanted to get rid of at his mother's house, stole a vehicle, I've also heard, and not that I'm judging the people the vehicle were allegedly stolen from, but some people have said that guy loaned Derek the car. The guy was at work. The guy's wife, so the gentleman that owned the stolen car in Shannon was at work. His wife was at home. And she looks out the window and sees the car driving off, but she knows her husband is at work. So she went to the police station and reported it as stolen. By the time she got back from reporting the stolen car, the car was back in front of her place. Derek had brought the car back after he stole it. So I don't know. It's just, and there's another thing. They supposedly had his fingerprints in the stolen car. They never charged him with auto theft. That was another thing. Like, you got so many charges, you can just add this charge because you can give him some more time for that. But they didn't even charge him with the stolen car, and they knew he did it because they got his fingerprints in there. And I don't get it. I don't know. There's just the guns, and even in Wisconsin, he gets caught with these guns. He's the felon who shot at women. He's held hostages with bombs. He's a felon in possession of firearms. His DNA is all over them. His fingerprints are on them. My son is a witness. He's pointing a gun at Melissa, right? They didn't charge him with federal. They could have given him a federal charge for felon in possession of a firearm. And I'm like, why? Why didn't they do that? But if a guy gets caught selling some crack, on the corner, he's got a handgun on him, they'll give that guy a federal, felon in possession of a firearm charge. But you can't charge a kidnapper who shoots at women and holds people hostage with bombs, and he is a suspect in his dad's murder. But you can't charge him with felon in possession of a firearm? And I think it's protection. I truly believe his DNA is on the guns. His fingerprints are on the guns. My son is a witness that Derek's pointing the gun at his mother. Another child is a witness that so Melissa had bought those guns. She had purchased those guns. The funny thing is, she never owned a gun when she was with me. She never owned a gun when she was with her ex-husband before me. She never owned a gun in her whole life. She gets with Derek. So there was a child at the Cabela's sporting goods store that Melissa's oldest child was with Melissa and Derek. Derek was telling Melissa which guns to buy. And they have all of that, but they can't charge Derek as a felon in possession of firearms. And I just don't get it. I just don't. I mean, he's a kidnapper. He holds hostages with bombs. But you know what? Let's not give him the federal charge that we can give him for being a felon in possession of guns and pointing those guns at Melissa. I don't know. It just makes me mad. It's just failures on law enforcement, failures on the prosecutors, failures on the federal government, failures on the judicial system, failures on our, system that just wants to let his mommy come bond him out every time he does some heinous stuff, failures on the parole board in Nevada, failures on Greene County, Wisconsin cops, failures on Stevenson County cops, failures on Carroll County cops. It's just it's a real shit show, and it's just failures all the way around,
Yeah. Hey,
now, did Derek have a job?
So shortly before the gun incident, he had worked as a cell phone tower operator or a cell phone tower technician. So, but but the problem is he was on meth at the time, and I don't think that job worked out for a few months. But he had gone, I know at one point in time, he went to school as a cell phone tower tech and as a windmill tower technician too. So, but I just think, I mean, in my opinion, I think he was too strung out on the methamphetamine and on the hard drugs, heroin and methamphetamine to maintain a job. So,
yeah. Renee, do you need to finish up something? Because Corrine has made a comment here. I just want to make sure that if she's wanting to make sure you're getting everything out, because we usually kind of get kicked off after 2 hours, and we are getting close within 10 minutes, give or take. So I think she's wanting to make sure you might have said anything you need to say or want to finish, and even if Todd has anything that he wants to throw in and add, just to make sure, because we usually do get kicked off, give or take around the 2 hour mark.
Well,
I got a quick question. Sorry, Renee.
go ahead.
On your FAA FOIA, is that going to come back next week? You said.
Yeah, they said they should have it all together and to me by the 7th.
awesome.
Okay.
I'll be looking forward to that.
Are crop dusters, do they have to have their trackers on all the time?
I believe they do.
I think they do.
Okay.
Yeah,
That was one of my questions.
Yeah, they do.
There's
Like Flight Radar 24, sometimes you'll see them and sometimes you won't. They still have to have their transponder on, but like for Flight Radar 24, they don't have to have, if they're flying a lower level, they don't have to have it turned on, but FAA is different. So that should have everything.
Gotcha. And then another question is, even though like Derek was at the hangar for 5 minutes, does that mean that like, we had the airplane theory, but what if like another car was involved where that was just a drop-off point? Derek ran, did something else, and then, a suspect number 2, finished off the job and picked her up.
I would say that could be a possibility.
Yeah.
I think these reports will help us, it's some way, some form is going to help us narrow down what exactly happened or what we can theorize happened, or, that way with the airport situation. So,
yeah, I mean, if a plane went off,
Yes.
that night or even that week, that would be a huge lead to follow up on for sure.
yes.
Sorry, go ahead.
I have a couple FOIAs coming back to me next week. One's going to be probably a huge bombshell. I'm hoping, unless some of the law enforcement's pulling my leg, but I'm hoping that happens. And then let's go back to Jackson's case for 1 second. Jackson Cradle's case. On the Officer Herbstreit and Amy Hubble, I know from my FOIA on I'm going to say it's public knowledge now, the Colshoney case, Officer Herbstreit was the first officer on scene for 40 minutes talking to Brett Wesner by himself, and there's no Herbstreit police report. None.
And Herbstreit is the one that hit and killed Jackson Cradle. That's the same officer. Yep.
And that's the one that they have now said is a homicide?
Yep.
Yes.
No, that's categorized as a suicide. And once you
Colshoney's is a suicide, but it's the officer that hit and killed Jackson Cradle that just got labeled as a homicide. Yes, I think that's what Dennis was trying to say, Todd.
Yep. Same officer on that scene.
On both cases. Yeah.
That was the first officer that found Cole, and his police report's missing.
And that's Matt Hurstreeps?
Yep.
Huh.
And I mean, I've been throwing out hints on Facebook, but I'll make this public. Cole Shoney's family in the police report says that all of the family's guns are accounted for, but Cole was found with a gun next to him.
I also heard that as well, but there was never one presented. Like there's no report to reflect or to say there was.
Well, I can drop it on Facebook tonight if you want me to.
The whole suicide report. There
Yep.
was, I believe that there was a gun found. They described the gun.
So
Yep.
there was.
Cole Shoney's suicide. Yep.
Okay.
And now,
But
mind
there's-
you, Cole Shoney's missing from a farm on Bolton Road, his family farm on Bolton and Stanton Road. Melissa's vehicle abandoned on Bolton Road. Derek's dad murdered on Bolton Road. David Allen Peters, whose wife hid out Jason Niesman, suicide the same day Derek went bonkers with the gun. Now, I don't know if I've gotten this across to you guys yet, but the day Derek went bonkers and pointed the gun at Melissa a month and 20 days before Melissa disappeared, that morning there was a suicide outside of Freeport in Stevenson County. And that is the next road down from Bolton Road. Well, that was David Allen Peters. David Allen Peters' wife, Lori Peters, hid Jason Niesman, the one who helped Derek abandon Melissa's truck. And now that can be proven by the GPS backtrack of her vehicle, of her rental truck, because it's her truck was still in the shop with the blown up motor. But the Lori Peters, whose husband just died of a fishy suicide, also off of Bolton Road, one road down from Bolton Road, that's Route 20 and AYP. The next road down is where Bolton Road starts. The next intersection is the beginning of Bolton Road. Well, this very same day, early that morning, David Allen Peters dies of a suicide, right? Later that afternoon, Derek's going nuts and threatens Melissa with the gun in front of my kids. Then, after Melissa's a missing person, the wife, Lori Peters, hides Jason Niesman out for weeks because the cops won't arrest Jason. They know he's lying about helping abandon Melissa's vehicle, that Derek showed up walking, which is some bullshit. They know he's sorry, but they know he's lying. And then the wife hides Jason Niesman out. I believe, I'm going to tell you this. I believe Derek either shot David Allen Peters in this supposed suicide, or that the wife, Lori Peters, shot David Allen Peters, and Derek came in and staged the crime scene to look like a suicide. And I believe he was having a panic attack and was looking for his pills, because as he was assaulting Melissa, he hit her with like a kitchen spoon or a spatula or something. He was screaming about some pills that he couldn't find in front of my kids. Then he pointed the gun at Melissa. That's the same day that David Allen Peters, of course, where? 1 block down from Bolton Road. Okay, where's Cole Shoney? Suicide. He's missing from a farm, Bolton Road. Where's Derek's dad found murdered? Bolton Road. Where's Melissa's vehicle abandoned? Bolton Road. I'm going to tell you, and all of them have provable connections. All of them. I mean, we have this stuff really, really well documented too. It isn't even like a theory or a rumor or this or that. We have all of this stuff extremely well documented.
Also, I want to throw in real quick, Stephen Dapkus's apartment. there's also, he's a very poetic person. He also had these poems written on the walls in his closet area, in his front room and kitchen area. I took pictures of them. I have them. I went through them because sometimes there can be hidden messages inside those, from things I've learned in college, in criminology and law enforcement. And those particular poems, there's dam and river at least 4 times a piece in there, and sands. And I know there's a certain spot that he used to go to all the time by the dams, down by the Army Depot. And so it's kind of, maybe she went that way as well. I mean, I'd have to send all that stuff to you guys, but, and all the photos and videos I've got. I mean, it's insane.
I'd also, if you guys want to look at, there's so much more to this. I mean, even talking about this for two different, live streams here, 2 hours a piece, 4 hours. The truth is like, there's so much more to this. Witness statements, people saying, Jay Rhodes' children's mother saying he's involved. The next girlfriend saying he's involved. The next girlfriend telling her girlfriend he's involved, even though she won't tell us. And then other people saying he's involved. I have a lot of this stuff documented, and I would love to share it with you guys. Some of it's kind of like stuff I have to retrieve off this phone, that phone, other stuff like that. But it is all retrievable, and it's, witness statements. Stephen Dapkus's neighbors, I've got a bunch of statements from them. I have a bunch of statements, of other witnesses, of things, people, just even some, and there's some rumor mill stuff there, but some of the rumor mill stuff fits with some of the stuff that we know is legitimate too. So, it's just, there's so much to this that, like, really, I think even in these last 2 live streams, like, we're really just kind of scratching the surface, and really still into like the first day of Melissa's disappearance, and haven't even entered in all these other witnesses and information and even some evidence and stuff that people have kind of given us, so there's just a lot to it. There's just so much to it. It's, it damn near, I don't know, it'll make your head spin. It's just a lot of stuff to it. But I saw somebody post up here earlier, where they're like, oh, that, I don't know who the person's name was. I think it was like a number next to their name. But I saw somebody said, there's too many coincidences. There's too many things to just be coincidence. The Bolton Road, police corruption, this cover up, that cover up. We got cops covering up Derek Hammer's dad's murder. Well, of course, they're covering up Melissa's, and you got these fishy suicides. You got these people connected to this, people connected to that. All the fires. Oh my God. We haven't, other than Stephen Dapkus's fire. Oh, Brett